Her true story from Nevada. My granddaughter screamed, "You're just a burden," and threw my cane across the gravel lot. So I left and sold the RV they were living in. She wanted freedom. I gave her the road. If you've ever been hurt by family but stood tall anyway, leave a tut 5 tut below so she knows she's not the only one. I said, "Get out." She shouted again. Her face twisted now, as if disgusted by the sight of me on the ground. "You're pathetic. You ruin everything, my marriage, my peace, my freedom, everything." Under the blistering Nevada sun, my bones ached before my heart did. But that morning, it was the heart that cracked first. The RV's door slammed behind me, rattling on its hinges like a warning I should have listened to months ago. My granddaughter stood there barefoot in cut-off shorts, her baby balanced on one hip, and venom in her voice. "You are just a burden," she screamed. "A walking corpse hovering around my kids. Get out of my life." Before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Try to watch the videos as long as possible by watching more often. YouTube will promote these stories to a larger audience, grow your channel, and bring you more interesting things. Let's start now. Her words hit harder than the sun. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't check if the baby flinched. She took a step forward and, with a flick of her wrist, hurled my cane. It hit the propane tank with a hollow clang and fell to the dirt like something disposable. Her husband stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw clenched, but he didn't move, not toward her, not toward me, not toward the cane. I tried to steady myself, but the edge of her words pushed harder than gravity ever could. My knees gave out. I collapsed onto the hot, packed earth. The sting of gravel meant nothing compared to the fire behind my eyes. I reached out, hand trembling, but my palm found only sand. She didn't help me. He didn't help me. The baby started to cry, not loud, just confused, like he could feel the violence in the air, but didn't yet know the words for it. I stayed there, catching my breath in shallow, shaky rises. Then I looked up at her, at the girl I had raised when her mother couldn't, the girl whose fever I'd broken at midnight, whose scraped knees I patched with peppermint tissue, whose pancakes I flipped with coins from gas station tips. But what stood before me now wasn't her. Not the toddler in overalls. Not the teenager who cried over boys. No. This was a stranger with my blood and none of my heart. I said, "Get out!" she shrieked again. "You ruin everything." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not because I had no words, but because I knew they wouldn't matter. She'd made up her mind. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed to see. I turned my face to the horizon. The Nevada sky stretched wide and merciless. That cracked road in the distance looked more like home than this RV ever had. "You heard her," her husband muttered at last. He walked past me, didn't check on me, didn't check on the baby, didn't meet my eyes. His shadow moved over me like a passing cloud that never meant to give shade. She turned too, hoisting the baby higher and slamming the RV door. Just like that, it was over. I was left on the ground. No cane, no apology, no goodbye, only silence. I sat up slowly. My body had learned caution long ago. Each shift of bone made its own music. But this time, the ache was not in the joints. It was in the hollow behind my ribs, where dignity used to live. I looked toward my cane a good 30 feet away. I remembered buying it for $20. Real wood, brass tip, carved handle. It was meant to help me walk proud. Now it lay there like trash. I braced my hands on the earth and stood inch by inch. I did not cry. I would not give her that. I would not give them that. Inside the RV, I could hear muffled arguing. Something about money, gas, groceries, the same words, the same weight, over and over like a scratched record. I used to jump in and offer to help, offer my pension, offer my hands, offer my sleep. But not anymore. Not after today. When I finally stood, I did not reach for the cane. Not yet. I looked back at the RV, the one I had bought with my husband's death money, the one they said would be our safe haven, our fresh start, the one I parked here, near their trailer lot, because they needed me close, or so they said. I smiled, not wide, not cruel, just a thin line of understanding between me and the wind. She said I was a burden. She said I ruined everything. She said I should go. And maybe for the first time in years, she was right. I took my first step toward the cane. Slow, careful, but not weak. My shadow stretched long behind me, thin and sharp like a slash across the gravel. I walked past their front door and didn't look back. I picked up my cane, dusted it off, and nodded to the sun. If I was going to leave, I would do it on my own terms, and I would not just walk away. I would take the roof above their heads with me. They wanted freedom. I would give them the road. When I was 19, I slept under a bridge outside Tonopah, Nevada, with nothing but a paper bag for a pillow and the sound of semis shaking the concrete above me for company. It was a bitter sort of lullaby. Cold wind, hot nights, and the occasional rattle of a coyote too curious for its own good. I would press my back against the hard dirt, stare up at the rusted steel girders, and imagine they were the beams of a real house. Funny how your definition of shelter shrinks when you're alone. I worked the night shift at a rundown gas station half a mile up the road. Back then, it was called Lou's. Hand-painted letters peeling off the sign like sunburned skin. I cleaned restrooms, filled tanks, wiped bugs off windshields, and smiled at men who thought my silence meant weakness. I earned $1.75 an hour, plus tips if someone felt generous. Most nights, I walked back to my spot beneath the bridge with a bottle of warm water and half a sandwich I saved from the vending machine. It was not a life. It was survival. But it was mine. No one knew my name. Not really. They called me Red because of my hair. Fiery and thick in those days, always tied back with the same rubber band until it snapped. I did not mind being invisible. Invisibility kept you safe. No one expected anything from you. And you owed nothing in return. I met Howard when I was 34. He came through the station in a beat-up Dodge with 2 flat tires and a laugh so loud it scared off the jackrabbits. He called me ma'am like it meant something, like I was more than a smudge on the counter of a forgotten town. He stayed longer than he planned. Said the desert did something to his heart. Said I did too. Howard was the first man who ever looked me in the eye and didn't see charity or trouble. He saw strength. And I suppose that was what hooked me, because I had forgotten I had any. We married in a small ceremony behind Lou's. The mechanic, the owner's wife, and 1 stray dog were our witnesses. I wore a blue dress from a Goodwill rack, and he gave me a ring that turned my finger green. I loved it. I loved him, and for the first time, I felt like someone's future, not just someone's past. Howard drove long-haul freight. He was on the road most weeks, home on weekends. I stayed behind, working the pumps, keeping the lights on, and writing him letters I never mailed. We talked about buying a house someday, maybe near the canyon, maybe somewhere greener, but neither of us believed it deep down. Dreams were just warm places to rest your thoughts, not things people like us held on to. Then came the accident. It was just past Barstow, slick roads, and a tire blowout on a turn no one should take at that speed. They told me he died instantly, that he didn't feel a thing. I nodded, thanked them, signed the papers with a hand I could barely steady, and went home to an empty trailer filled with his socks and the smell of diesel. The insurance money came 6 weeks later, $160,000. I held the check in my hands for hours, staring at the zeros like they were part of some cruel joke. I never expected anything from Howard, least of all, money. But there it was, real as the dirt under my fingernails. I did not tell a soul, not the station owner, not the bank teller, not even the woman who cried with me at the funeral and handed me half a pecan pie. Instead, I folded that check into the back of a Bible I had not opened in years and waited. Waited for the right moment. Waited to feel like I deserved it. That moment came 3 months later, when Lou's shut down without warning. A padlock on the doors, a sign in the window that said, "Godspeed, no severance, no thank you, just silence." So I went to the dealership off Route 6, walked past rows of shiny, smiling salesmen, and found her. A 35-foot Class C motorhome, used but solid, beige with a navy stripe down the side. She looked like freedom on wheels, like a place that could keep secrets, like a home that did not need land to be real. I paid cash, no questions asked. They handed me the keys, and I drove her to the edge of town, parked near the old train yard, and for the first time in my life, locked a door behind me that was mine. I named her June. Inside, I had a twin bed, a stove that worked when it wanted to, a radio that only picked up country stations, and a tiny bathroom with a mirror cracked in one corner. It was paradise. I filled the cabinets with soup cans, lined the windows with old curtains, and lit candles every night like I was someone worth praying for. The hum of the generator became a lullaby, the creak of the steps a welcome home. I stayed in June for 20 years. We moved when the police told me to. We parked near friends when they needed company. We crossed 3 states and saw more sky than most people ever do. I never remarried. Never needed to. Howard gave me his last breath, and I turned it into something solid. People pitied me sometimes. They would see me at the gas station, older now, slower, and ask if I needed help. I would smile and tell them no, because how do you explain to someone that your little house on wheels is the only thing that ever made you feel safe? Then came the call. It had been years since I heard from my granddaughter. She was grown now, had a baby of her own, trouble with rent, trouble with men, trouble with life. And I had June. I had room. I had space for her and the child and even the boy who followed her like a ghost. So I said yes. Of course I said yes, because I still remembered the day she was born. The way she wrapped her hand around my finger and wouldn't let go. I remembered feeding her when her mama disappeared for days, bathing her in a metal tub, reading her stories from a book with half the pages missing. She was mine in every way that mattered. And now, she needed me again. So I drove June to a small lot outside Reno, parked her under a shade tree, and waited. I thought I was giving them shelter. I thought I was giving them love. But what I gave was a roof they thought they owned and a woman they thought they could break. They never knew where I came from. They never saw the bridge. They never tasted the dirt I once called dinner. What they were about to learn, the call came just after sundown. I was parked on the edge of Carson City, the sky still bleeding orange into violet, when the phone buzzed against the little metal table in my kitchenette. I picked it up without checking the number. My hands were always quick to answer when it might be her. Grandma. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges like a shirt that had been worn too many times. Sweetheart, I sat up straighter, already reaching for my glasses. I lost my job. They cut staff again, and the rent's due this week, and I don't know. I was just wondering if I could maybe stay with you, just for a little while. Just a few weeks until I figure something out. I did not hesitate, not even a breath. Of course. Baby, you come home. June's got plenty of room. I'll get the bed made up. You just get here safe. She cried then. I could hear it. The kind of cry someone tries to swallow, like a confession. It made my chest ache. I had not heard her voice in over a year, not since the baby shower, when she sat 3 tables away and barely met my eye. But none of that mattered now. Not the silence, not the distance. She needed me, and I was still her grandmother. That night, I went to the market and bought the things I remembered she liked. Grape soda, cinnamon toast cereal, those little frozen burritos she used to sneak in the middle of the night when she was 13. I restocked the pantry and made the bed with the soft blue sheets I kept in the overhead bin. I even set out a picture of us at the lake. She was 7, clinging to my back like a barnacle, cheeks flushed with sun. When she arrived 2 days later, she looked tired, older, not in the way of years, but in the way life wears on people too young to carry its weight. Her arms were wrapped around a car seat, and inside was the baby, tiny, pink, blinking at the new world like it owed him something. I kissed her cheek and held the baby in my arms, letting his warmth sink into my bones. You still smell like cinnamon, she laughed through her nose. And you still forget to wear a jacket, I teased. Come on, let's get you fed. The first week was sweet like molasses. She helped with the dishes, made coffee in the mornings, rocked the baby in my chair while we watched old reruns on a fuzzy screen. She told me I was her second mother, that I had done more for her than her own parents ever had, that she did not know what she would do without me. I nearly cried into my soup. Every night I thanked God, or whatever was left of him, that she had come back, that I had a second chance to be part of her life, to help raise that little boy the way I wished I had raised her. Better. But the softness faded faster than I expected. It began with a phone call. I invited Caleb over, she said casually as she stirred powdered creamer into her coffee. Who's Caleb? Just the baby's dad. He wants to be around more. For us. I did not say no. I never wanted to be the kind of grandmother who closed doors, but I felt a prick in my chest that I could not explain. I cleaned the RV top to bottom that day. Twice, as if I could scrub the nerves off my skin. Caleb showed up 2 days later. He was taller than I expected, with tattoos crawling up both arms, and a voice too smooth for someone with calloused hands. He shook my hand without looking me in the eye and kissed the baby on the forehead like it was an obligation. He called my granddaughter babe and called me ma'am, which sounded more like a warning than a greeting. He'd brought in a duffel bag, then a second, then a pair of sneakers that smelled like smoke and sweat. No one asked if he could stay. Suddenly, my RV wasn't mine anymore. The baby's cries filled the small space at all hours. Loud music bled from their side of the curtain. Caleb would eat and leave dishes in the sink. Sometimes I would wake up and find beer cans in the trash. Once, the bathroom door would not close because someone had kicked it too hard. Still, I kept trying. I baked banana bread, offered to babysit, fixed the loose handle on the drawer that jammed every time they opened it too fast. I even gave up my favorite chair so they could rock the baby to sleep. But little things started disappearing. My lavender lotion, my old radio, a silver bracelet that meant nothing to them but held my whole past. I found cigarette butts tucked into a mason jar I used for sewing pins. The coffee was always gone before sunrise, and slowly, the warmth in her eyes turned into something distant, detached, as if I were a relic of a life she no longer wanted to remember. There were no more thank yous, no more hugs, just the sound of doors shutting hard enough to make the windows rattle. The worst part wasn't the noise, or the mess, or even the space I lost in my own home. It was the way she looked at me, like I was furniture, like I had served my purpose and was now just taking up air. One night, I heard them arguing. The baby was crying again. Caleb's voice rose like a storm. "She's always in the damn way. We can't even breathe in this place." Then her voice, I know, she's trying." Oh, trying. She's 100 years old and walks like a ghost. She's depressing as hell. I sat on the edge of my bed, blanket clutched in my hands, heart clenched like a fist. They did not whisper. They did not care if I heard. When she came out that morning, she did not meet my eyes, just poured her coffee and went back behind the curtain. That was when I knew the weeks she promised had turned into something else entirely. I was no longer a guest in my own RV. I was a ghost haunting the last thing I owned. But ghosts have memories, and mine were sharper than they realized. It began with a smell. One morning, I was folding laundry. Baby bibs, my old flannel pajamas, a shirt Caleb left crumpled in the corner when she wrinkled her nose and waved her hand through the air. She muttered, not even trying to whisper. "It smells like old cigarettes in here, like deep in the furniture kind of smell." I paused mid-fold. My hands froze on a dish towel. "I haven't smoked in years," I said softly. "Since before the baby was born." She shrugged. "Yeah, well, it's still in the walls or whatever. I don't want my friends thinking we live in a nursing home." I looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was tied in a high knot, her eyeliner sharp, her voice cooler now, laced with something I hadn't heard before. Embarrassment of me. That night, I watched her spray perfume all over the RV, on the cushions, the curtains, even the throw blanket I used when my knees ached. It was one of those body sprays that smelled like artificial flowers in high school hallways. She doused my armchair with it until the fabric was damp. "I just want it to smell fresh in here," she said, brushing past me like clean. "Like people under 80 actually live here." I did not answer. I just opened a window and let the cold air slap my cheeks. The next day, she reorganized the RV for more space. That was how she phrased it. "We need a better setup for the baby," she said. "And you need more privacy." "Right, for naps and stuff." Before I could respond, she started moving my things, my books, my yarn, the photo frames I'd set on the counter, all swept into a plastic bin and carried to the back sleeping area. She hung a cheap curtain rod between the kitchen and the hallway, pulled the fabric closed, and declared, "There. Now we each have our own zone, except my zone was the far back near the generator where the bed frame creaked with every turn and the air smelled like rust." It was the only part of June that never got sun in the morning. I sat there that night in silence, listening to them laugh up front, watching shadows move behind the curtain, like I was no longer part of their world. Like I was a ghost tucked in the attic. One evening, her friends came over. 3 of them, loud and full of opinions. The RV could barely hold us all. I was pouring myself a cup of tea when she stopped me mid-step. "Hey," she whispered, pushing me gently toward the back. "Can you maybe stay behind the curtain for a bit? It's just, I don't want them to feel awkward. You know how people are with, like, older folks?" I blinked at her. Older folks. I was her grandma. I raised her. I wiped her nose and held her through heartbreak and bailed her out of a dozen messes her parents never even knew about. And now I was someone to hide. "I'll be quiet," I said, my voice hoarse. "No, it's not that," she said quickly. "It's just, they don't get it, and I don't want to have to explain everything. Just for an hour, please." I went to the back, pulled the curtain closed behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed. My tea cooled in my hands. I stared at the floor until the voices up front drowned out my thoughts. They laughed, talked about bars and jobs and what life would be like once they got out of here. Out of here. I realized, meant me. I was the location to escape. When they finally left, I emerged slowly. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Thanks," she muttered. "You're a lifesaver." I forced a smile. It cracked at the edges. After that, it became routine. Visitors meant I vanished, not just physically, but emotionally too. I stopped being asked about anything. My opinion, my past, even what I wanted for dinner. None of it mattered. I was decoration, an old lamp you left on because it flickered enough to be useful. Once she caught me reading a letter from Howard, one I kept folded in my Bible. She glanced at it and said, "You're always in the past. No wonder you don't get how things work now." I closed the book, said nothing, because she was right about one thing. I did not understand how someone could forget where they came from. But I was starting to learn. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of Nevada night where the heat clings to your skin long after the sun disappears, and the wind carries whispers from the desert like secrets you were never meant to hear. I had been asleep only a few hours when I woke to voices, sharpened, frantic, hissing through the thin walls of the RV like steam through a cracked pipe. The baby was crying. Again. I sat up, already tense. Caleb was yelling something about money. About how the hell did we run out so fast I heard the refrigerator door slam, the rattle of coins in a jar, and my granddaughter's voice trying to calm him down, failing miserably. Then the knock came, 3 heavy pounds on the RV door. I swung my legs off the bed and shuffled toward the front, my cane tapping softly against the floor. Caleb opened the door before I got there. A tow truck sat outside. Its engine rumbled low like a threat. "Your tank's dry," the man said gruffly, arms crossed over a reflective vest. "Dispatch says you're past due 3 weeks. You either pay for the fuel tonight, or I take the unit to storage." I blinked. Storage. My granddaughter shoved past me, baby clinging to her shoulder, her hair in wild tangles. We were going to pay Friday. "We get a deposit then." The man didn't flinch. "That's not my problem, ma'am." I looked at her. She looked at Caleb. He looked down at the floor. Then she turned, sharp, sudden, and her eyes locked onto mine like twin knives. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You're the reason we're in this mess. My mouth fell open. What if you weren't here? She snapped. We wouldn't be burning through everything. You use up our food, our space, our damn oxygen. We were doing fine before you came. That's not true, I said softly, voice shaking. You called me. You asked to come here. Yeah, for a few weeks. She spat. Not forever. You never leave. You just sit there and rot. I felt something shift in my chest then. A heaviness. A terrible clarity. I can help with the fuel. I said quietly. I have a little saved. She laughed, sharp and bitter. What? From your pension. You think a few pennies will fix this? Caleb stood by. Silent. Then she walked to the counter, grabbed my cane, my sturdy old cane with the brass tip, and marched to the door. What are you doing? I asked, heart rising. She opened the door wide, took 2 long strides into the night, and with a grunt, flung the cane across the gravel lot. It clattered loudly against the rocks, disappearing into the dark. Then she turned back and screamed. You are a useless, crippled parasite. You destroyed everything. Her voice was fire, the kind that leaves nothing standing. I took a step forward, but the RV shifted slightly, and without my cane, my balance faltered. My foot caught on the edge of the rug, and I fell hard, face first into the dirt outside. Pain shot through my hip, sharp and unrelenting. My palms scraped against the rocks, and heat from the day still pulsed off the ground, searing into my skin. I lay there, stunned, heart pounding in my ears. No one moved to help me. The baby had gone quiet. Too quiet. Like even he sensed the cruelty had gone too far. My granddaughter stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression blank. Caleb stepped around me to close the RV door. That was it. No apology. No hand. No word. I turned my head slowly and looked up at the sky. Nevada's stars stretched wide and clear, indifferent. The silence wrapped around me, broken only by the low, idle hum of the tow truck, waiting for its order. And I thought to myself, so this is where the story ends. Not with illness, not with weakness, not even with time, but with betrayal from the one I loved most. And then something colder than the air settled into my bones. Not sadness, not even rage, just understanding. So this is who you are now, I thought. And now I know who I need to become. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to cry. I had no tears left, only resolve. When I opened them again, the stars hadn't moved, but something in me had. They wanted me gone, then gone I would be. But not before I took back what was mine. Because if I was a burden, I'd make sure they felt the weight of losing me. That night, while they slept, her curled up with the baby, Caleb passed out with his feet on the table and a beer can rolling slowly against the floor. I packed a bag. Not much. Just the essentials. My Bible. A worn photo of Howard. One clean blouse. My arthritis medicine. A half roll of bills I had hidden in the lining of my sewing pouch. Money they never knew existed. I worked silently, like I used to in the gas station stockroom. Every creak of the cabinet every zip of the bag. I paused and listened for movement, but none came. The RV, for once, was quiet. I wrote the note last, just one sentence, written in neat block letters across the back of an envelope. You wanted freedom. I left you the wheels. I placed it in the center of the kitchen table, next to an empty cereal box and one of the baby's rattles. I adjusted it until it lay perfectly square. A goodbye without a goodbye. Then I opened the RV door and stepped into the Nevada night. It was cooler now. Dry. The kind of cold that cracked your knuckles and made the sand crunch underfoot. I walked carefully down the road, cane in hand, back straight, each step measured. Not slow, not hurried, just steady. There was a truck stop 2 miles out, the kind that still had a payphone on the side near the ice machine. I passed 3 jackrabbits and 1 pickup with its headlights off, parked at an angle, like someone forgot it mattered. The payphone worked. Miraculously, I fed it quarters and dialed the number from memory. Hello, Tammy, I said, my voice low. It's me. A pause, then a breath. I'll be damned. Still got that friend in Utah who needed a rig. Another pause. You selling Jim? When now? By sunrise. The tow truck was there. Not the same one from the night before. No. This one came from a lot I trusted. A man named Vince drove it. He wore overalls and called me ma'am in a way that didn't sting. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when I handed him the keys. I stood across the lot as he attached the hitch as the rig jerked slightly and began its slow crawl out of the dirt. I watched June, the RV that held 2 decades of my life, roll forward without hesitation. I did not cry. I did not wave. I just stood there with my hands in my coat pocket, watching as the only home I had ever truly claimed was pulled out of their lives forever. Somewhere, just 100 feet away, they were still asleep. Her and the man who let me fall. The child I once rocked to sleep. They would wake to nothing. No breakfast. No shelter. No note, except for the one that waited on the table like a judgment. You wanted freedom. I left you the wheels. I imagined her face when she read it. The disbelief. The panic. The moment she realized whose name was on every legal document. The moment she realized no one owed her a thing. I paid the driver in cash. Tammy would wire the rest. I told her I needed a quiet place in Utah. Something small. 1 level. No stairs. She said she knew just the spot. A few hours later, I sat in the back seat of her sedan, the desert fading behind us, my bag at my feet. I can't believe you finally left, she said. I looked out the window. They asked me to, and I meant it, not with words, but with everything else. And now they could have all the silence they gave me, emptied out across the gravel like sand through a broken hourglass. They say people do not appreciate what they have until it is gone. The next morning, as the sun baked the sand outside their lot, and the baby wailed for a bottle that was not in the fridge, they discovered the truth. June was gone, vanished. No wheels in the dirt, no note on the windshield, no sound of me clinking around the kitchenette or humming that old Patsy Cline song under my breath. Just silence and absence. I imagine it took them a few minutes to realize what had happened. First, they probably thought I had gone out early, maybe walked to the store. But the longer the minutes stretched, the more they must have felt that prickling cold at the base of their necks, the kind that comes when the power goes out and you realize it is not coming back. She found the note first, the envelope still sitting on the table, surrounded by the debris of a life they never truly owned. You wanted freedom. I left you the wheels. That is when the panic began. They ran outside, checked the lot, asked the neighbor who just shrugged and said he saw an older woman get into a tow truck around dawn. Figured she was just moving on. He told them. I heard later they called the police. Said their grandmother was missing. Said she's old. Probably confused that she doesn't know what she's doing. The officer pulled the title. My name. Only mine. Everything. Insurance. License registration was legally, solely and undeniably mine. There's no crime here. He told them. She owns it. If she left, that's her right. But she's 73, my granddaughter shouted. She's probably got dementia or something. She just walked off. And she left in a registered tow vehicle. Ma'am, the officer said, with paperwork. You can't file a missing persons report when the person isn't missing. She just does not want to be found. That is when she turned to Facebook. I saw the post a day later, sent to me through a mutual friend in Utah. It was a picture of me from 2 years ago at the baby shower, holding a plate of deviled eggs with a smile that barely reached my eyes. She captioned it. My grandma is missing. She's elderly, confused, and maybe in danger. If anyone sees her, please call. She left without her medication. We're worried sick. The comments were full of sympathy, prayers, shared links, emoji hearts. They did not know the truth. They did not know the medication was in my bag. They did not know I walked out whole, clear, and more lucid than I had been in years. A few even blamed her. One woman, God bless her, commented, "Didn't you post last week about her being a burden? Now she's missing, and you're surprised the post was deleted by nightfall." The messages kept coming. People asking if I was safe, if I was scared, if I was lost. I answered none of them. Let them wonder. Let them taste the flavor of absence. You see, there is something powerful about silence, true silence. Not the kind that comes from being ignored, but the kind you choose. It fills the room like smoke, makes people itch, makes them replay every word they ever said to you. I had nothing left to say, not to her, not to him, not to the world that pities the old and forgets they were once iron. In Utah, I unpacked my bag slowly. Tammy had given me a small room in her guest house, soft bed, clean linens, even a tiny window with lace curtains. I placed Howard's photo on the nightstand and my Bible beside it. I did not need much else. I took my first real breath in weeks. No one shouted. No one stomped. No one sprayed perfume to erase the scent of my life. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the sky change colors like it was remembering something it used to be. They say the past clings to you, but I was beginning to learn sometimes the best revenge is simply leaving them to hear their own echoes. A week later, after the dust had settled and their search had quieted into bitter silence, I walked to the little post office 2 blocks from Tammy's house. It was a clear morning in Utah, soft light spilling across the porch railings, the kind that made you forget all the ways the world could be cruel. I carried only one envelope. Inside was a photo I had kept folded at the bottom of my old Bible for decades. It was taken 40 years ago. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough to see the truth. I was under a bridge just outside Tonopah, kneeling beside a shopping cart, arms wrapped around my legs, chin resting on my knees. My hair was tied back with a rag, my eyes sunken, but proud. I looked tired, but not broken. That was the difference. I slipped the photo into the envelope and wrote the return address in tiny letters. Just a P.O. box. No name. I tucked a note inside, too. Just one line. You wanted freedom. This is where I started. Now it's your turn. No anger, no cruelty, just memory. The kind that lingers longer than rage. I dropped the envelope into the slot and stood there a moment, hand still on the metal, before turning and walking home. The room I rented was small. One bed, one lamp, one window that opened when you cranked it hard enough. But it was mine. There were no slam doors, no footsteps overhead, no whispered insults through paper-thin walls. Just peace. Tammy brought me tomatoes from her garden that afternoon. We sat on the porch and split one with salt and a spoon. It was sweeter than I remembered. Maybe because no one took it from my plate. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. A breeze rolled through, carrying pine and dust and silence. I dreamed of nothing. And the next morning, for the first time in over 40 years, I made breakfast without fear. 2 scrambled eggs, 1 slice of toast, a bit of jelly I bought myself. No one called me a burden. No one asked me to disappear. And I did not miss them. I only wondered how long it would take her to recognize that bridge.